Situated near the World Heritage Site of Matobo Hills, this is the weekend escape of Bex and Sophia Ndlovu. It's a brief drive from Bulawayo for Bex and his family. He founded and is the CEO of an adventure safaris operation in Zimbabwe, Botswana and Zambia. When he wants to get away from it all, he comes here to the land of his ancestors.
I definitely didn't expect to arrive in the middle of nowhere with a vintage car. Do you collect them?
Yes, I do. It's something that I have fallen weak to over the last 5 years, and the Ford Model T is one of 6.
And you then decided to build this beautiful house in the middle of nowhere, literally.
Well, that's the whole idea, to be in the middle of nowhere. The place really speaks of peace and tranquility. It's as close to nature as one can get.
The surroundings are really fitting of the architectural style.
So I built it with the view to make sure that the place really resonated with the natural surroundings and that there is no disconnect between the natural elements and the house itself.
At first glance, I'm already seeing some unique furniture pieces.
It was part of the creative process of putting the house together, was collecting and using old pieces that I've been collecting over years, and finally they found a home.
They called the house Khayelitsha, which is Ndebele for house in stone. But one of the first features you notice is the Auto Parts outdoor lounge suite.
There's shock absorbers, there's flywheels, there's clutch plates and brake pads and various other things that all just came together for outdoor furniture that would outstand the weather elements.
Well, I'd love to see more.
Designing and building their home from scratch, Bex conceived the blueprint long before the build began. The wood and stone were far more than stylistic choices.
I believe there's quite an interesting story behind the stone walls and the sleepers.
There is. The railway sleepers, as you know, Africa was basically developed via the railway line system. So those are the original reclaimed railway sleepers from the Rhodesian days. And I wanted to really incorporate them into part of the story of the house. And the stone walls are actually a feature of Great Zimbabwe. So each individual briquette was hand carved, and we put it together. We again wanted to showpiece what this country is about, and that is the patterns of the ruins. And you go throughout Southern Africa where you find old ruins from 400 or 500 years ago. That dry stone walling is the pattern. And on the stonework, you will actually see the typical signature of the ruins of Africa through the chevron patterns that you would have seen on the wall.
That's amazing. You have quite an eclectic style. Tell me about some of your favorite pieces.
Well, actually, it's difficult to say favorite. It's like asking which one is your favorite child. But, you know, there's the Benin lions, which are a form of currency. The royalties out in the village of Benin and the villages, they would have these as a form or symbol of wealth. And there's various sizes, and that would symbolize what your wealth was.
Out here on the veranda, color brings textures and prints together. Many features have been locally crafted in keeping with Beck's desire to make the most of homegrown skills from across the continent.
And at the end of the deck, you'll notice there are little chairs for little people. Those are actually pygmy stools from Cameroon that the pygmies actually use. And those are perfect for kids when they're sitting around and playing games, or the kids sit around and eat at that table. Well, shall we go in and see the rest of the house?
Wait a minute, before we go though, I think you and I are both overdressed because we still have our shoes on.
Way overdressed.
So I think it's only noble that we take them off, right?
Correct.
As they say, when in Rome.
Absolutely.
The Ndlovus see their feet as firmly rooted in African soil, but equally as citizens of the world. It shows in their mix of North, East, West and Southern African styles.
Wow, this is absolutely amazing. You know what? I'm trying to box this home into a certain style, but I can't. There's so many interesting and unique pieces. Do you travel quite a lot to collect them?
I do, and I live a life of travel. Particularly interesting travels for me have been around Africa. But I have tried to incorporate quite a lot of unique pieces from my travels, but also just general pieces of very interesting artwork, such as this beautiful wooden cabinet behind me here from India, the door from Zanzibar, and a lot of the doors in this house are actually either Indian doors or doors from East Africa. And they just paint a whole picture of creativity.
And I love how you've incorporated the furniture.
It's great to be able to handpick all these individual pieces. I don't believe in having furniture for the sake of having a furniture. And as you can see, Lorna, this beautiful coffee table is actually Indian doors under the glass. And just to be able to see that with the padlock in its original form, and even though the paint is basically half stripped off, gives it quite a lot of charm and character.
Bex, is that an actual tree?
Actually, that is a real tree. When I was building the house, it was important for me to have a very light footprint, or rather impact, on the area. And when I saw this tree, it was dead bang in the middle of what would be this house. So I actually decided to be a little adventurous and leave it, to protect it and incorporate it as part of the house. So it actually, what you see here is only half of it. The rest of it is down below in the wine cellar.
That is really cool. Speaking of low footprint, I'm sure this house is off the grid.
We're completely off the grid, and that was an important aspect of developing a place like this in such a remote wilderness area. So the whole house runs off solar. We've got about 20 solar panels on the roof, and that's just for electricity. And then, of course, we've got a solar array for the hot water.
Come 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, it's Destination Matobo, with no Wi-Fi or cell signal, just the family connecting with nature.
It's lovely how from every angle of the house you're surrounded by these massive rocks.
So the whole idea of these massive rocks is to be constantly reminded of them. I created this space where you've got these great, huge, big windows. For example, if you look at those Indian arches from an old temple in India, everything is perfectly framed within the space of the big glass windows. So at any one time, everything is framed around this woodwork, whether it's the arches from an Indian temple or the sliced railway sleepers that have formed this frame to basically frame the nature.
Cooking in this kitchen must be quite delightful because it feels like you're outside.
As you know, Lorna, in an African setting in the village, most cooking is actually done outside under the stars. So I really wanted to try and achieve that sense of being able to cook outside together with nature.
There's surely one invitation that's prized above most in Zimbabwe, and that's being asked to join Sophia and Bex for the weekend.
And Lorna, this is our guest bedroom, one of 4. Each of the bedrooms has got a double wash basin and of course a bathtub. Doesn't matter where you are in this room, you'll notice that you've got constant views of just the great vistas of Matobo out there.
I believe there's an interesting story with those taps.
There is a bit of an interesting story. So those taps and the wash basins are actually from an old derelict site in Marrakesh. One of my travels, I went up to the streets and basically they're reclaimed, repolished. You'll see along the taps you've got all the magnificent Arabic etchings on them. So I fell in love with that detail, and you can see the same detail in the bathtub taps.
It's first and foremost a family home to the Ndlovos and their 3 children. Beck's first step on meeting German-born nurse Sophia was to convince her that he needed permanent nursing. Her passion for volunteer work in Zim and his love for African conservation made them a fine match. And every day they wake up here, they consider a gift.
Oh, Bex, this is absolutely spectacular. What inspired the entire look and feel of all the bedrooms?
Well, it was about creating spacious places, but bringing in the view into the rooms.
I've noticed quite a bit of corrugated iron around the house.
I love the look of the reclaimed roofing sheets. I've spent a lot of time in Australia, and a lot of buildings out in the outposts and shipyards and cattle posts are actually made out of corrugated iron sheets. But it actually started off as a funny joke between me and my friends that I was building a shack in the bush. So it was supposed to be a bush shack, and I got slightly carried away, as you see.
I can't help but talk about this amazing view.
This is a pretty epic view, but I'd like to take you for a special walk and just show you something else which will blow your mind.
Matobo is the historical land of King Mzilikazi, his son Lobengula, and of Beck's forebears. When he first met Sophia, they spent their free days exploring the area. They fell in love with its beauty and sense of energy, and were married here 13 years ago. They knew they would build a home in this land of the Aboriginal people of Southern Africa.
It's not difficult to imagine that this entire rock face would have been covered in these Bushman paintings. except you can see the two different sections, one on that side and one on this side that is weathered because of the weather elements. But if you have a look, that peak is what's protected this lot.
Amazing.
And kept it preserved for these thousands of years.
This is just phenomenal.
Beautiful, very special stopover, but we'll carry on up the hill.
It was a privilege being able to buy a 240-hectare tract of land in this magical area. And it's a pretty impressive rock to be on.
Look at that. What a pleasant surprise.
Well, this is what makes Matobo special, to be able to do wonderful things like this.
What is it about living out here and having this beautiful home that you most enjoy?
Well, you know, it's the peace, the tranquility, and this absolute wilderness area.
Well, I can't wait to go to the edge to take it all in.
And when we get to that edge, you'll feel like going to the next edge because each of the edges are just spectacular.
Oh, wow. Well, cheers to a beautiful part of Zimbabwe that people need to discover.
Cheers.
Great kingdoms come and go, but there's a sense of permanence and perspective. Bex considers himself lucky to be its guardian for a while, and his children after him.